Hi, good afternoon. My name's Alister Benn, and you're watching Expressive Photography, and this is Rachael Talibart. Hi,
Hello, hi. Very good to see you, Alister.
and you. Lovely to have you back on the YouTube channel. This all sparked off at the beginning of September. We bumped into each other in a random hotel on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula of Iceland. And in the 15 minutes that we spent nattering, we decided that we would do this. And this was the first date that we could find in both of our diaries where we could possibly conceivably do it. So it's a pleasure to see you again. It was wonderful to finally meet you. What a week that was for weather.
Likewise. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Brilliant, define brilliant for those people who weren't there.
It was very changeable, wasn't it? And we had really big seas, really high seas, a lot of
Yeah,
wind. And in fact, the first morning of my workshop, which I met you at, you were moving on, I think,
correct.
and we were just beginning.
Yeah,
So that next morning, which was the first morning for us, we just went down to the shore at Helnar, and everyone just got had so much fun. It was
yeah,
I've been there so many times. I've never seen the sea. You know that sort of arch there. It's a bit like a
yep,
cave
yeah,
arch, sea arch. I've never seen the sea rush through that with so much power before. So we
yeah.
had a lot of fun.
It was insane. I mean, that's one of the things that anyone who ever watches a Vision and Light interview knows that they can go anywhere, and it's not just a case of a list of pre-scripted questions that we've agreed to discuss beforehand. So for anyone who's watching this, neither Rachel nor I have any idea where it's going. So the first question that kind of comes to my mind then is, when you're on the coast and it's raining and blowing a gale, how do you overcome the main technical difficulty of keeping your kit dry and keeping your lens dry and so forth? I mean, you're a woman who spends an awful lot of time at the coast, so it's dish your secrets time.
Oh, I haven't really got any, except maybe the biggest secret is that our cameras are way more resilient than people think. Um, so obviously my camera doesn't really want to go for a swim. They're not meant to go underwater without an underwater housing. But when it comes to rain and spray, they can stand a whole ton of stuff. Um, so I'm not too worried about that. I think sometimes when people are earlier in their experience of photography, they can be a little bit too anxious about their gear and its safety. Sometimes I have clients on workshops who are a bit not keen to change lenses on the
Yeah,
beach. And what's the point of having an interchangeable lens camera if you can't change lenses? So I
right.
think we need. I think isn't actually, as professionals, it's good that we tell people this, that your cameras are more resilient than you think.
Yeah,
But obviously, load of spray and rain on the lens isn't going to help your photos. And lens hood, you know, it's
right.
so often that I see people, they've got the lens hood on, but it's gone backwards for storage, right? And they just leave it
Yeah,
there. The lens hood is not just there to protect you from sun flare. It keeps spray off the lens, especially if you're shooting with a long lens.
right.
So those are
And
the two key things, really.
right. And it's funny because when you talk about that, on the last two workshops I did, the one I did in Iceland, one of the ladies got a message that basically said that her camera had stopped communicating in any shape or form. It was just rain. It got into the thing, and it was just like, this is not going to work for me. And a guy who was in Spain with me, his camera got so wet that it just basically completely stopped working. So I think the caveat we should always say with that is, yes, your cameras are more resilient than we think. However, good insurance is also worthwhile.
Yes, it is. But also, camera can mean a whole load of different machines. And
Yes.
one thing that everyone should do is Google how weather sealed their camera is,
Yeah.
because if you've just bought a camera and you're at a relatively early stage in your photography journey, you might not actually have even thought about weather sealing.
Yeah,
And not all
that's
cameras are equal when it comes to weather sealing. A
no.
big tip, depending again on camera brand, but with a lot of cameras, the weak spot's behind the articulating screen.
All
So
right.
if you're out in heavy rain or heavy spray, it's better not to pull the screen out.
All right.
Keep it flush, because
All right.
behind there it can get in. Depending
Oh,
on the camera, again, I'm generalizing madly.
oh gosh, I'm really glad I had this chat. But it's really weird, you know, when you finally meet someone who you haven't met before. Um, because the thing I felt with you was that it was like we just knew each other for years and years and years, and you're just meeting an old friend. It's really, it was lovely. It was such a lovely thing. And the other cool thing was that both of our groups, that your group knew who I was and my group knew who you were, and it was this lovely thing where it's like everyone just felt like there was a real sense of unity, that we could have just hung out and everyone would have got on, and it was just such a really cool little moment. It was just really, really nice. So I was super happy, and obviously that's led to this conversation. Now, one of the reasons we decided that we're going to have a chat, let's get this out of the way nice and early, is you have taken quite a significant step by producing a new book. And I'd love you to tell me more about the reasons you did that. And because this is the book of yours that I have, which was your Tides and Tempest book. And in there are some of your siren images, which I've always loved. And I think when we think about seascape photography, contemporary seascape photography, your name has to be at the absolute top of the list for someone whose relationship with the element and your expressive spectrum is so broad with regards to how you express yourself. And we've obviously talked about this the last time that you and I did one of these video interviews. So obviously you've taken the step to produce a fairly significant book. So please, I'd love you to tell me more about that.
Okay, yeah. It's brand new, and it's Sirens again. So Sirens was a book way back in early 2018. It was finally published, but it was a slender volume. It was published by Triple Kite, and they had a particular format. You know, when you work with a publisher, you have to compromise in many ways, and one of them was their particular format. So it wasn't that big. Then obviously Tides and Tempests came along, which allowed me to go a bit bigger, both in the sort of outside dimensions, but also the page count. But it wasn't Sirens, it was much broader selection of my coastal work. Now, Sirens 1, that slender volume, sold out super fast. We did 1,000, and it was all gone really well within a year. It was completely gone. And I've been nagged endlessly ever since to do a second edition. But I love repeating myself when it's going back to locations and things like that. We've talked about that before. But I don't really like repeating myself when it comes to books, I've realised. And I didn't want to do just a second edition of Sirens. I wanted to do something different. And there was also another really big thing, which is that I've had a hankering, having done 3 books with a publisher, because I did one before Sirens as well. I had a hankering to do a book that wouldn't be done with any commercial compromises. So if you work with a publisher, of course they have to make money from it. That's the deal. Otherwise, why are they doing it? You know, they're not charities. Right. And so there's always going to be compromises. And it sometimes can feel as if when you're working with a publisher, every decision you're making is chipping away at your vision for the book. So what I wanted to do was to flip that around and actually say yes every time there was a, shall we go bigger? Shall we go more luxurious? Shall we spend more money? And just always say yes. Now, it's very, very expensive to do that. And I know you have produced a high quality book yourself, so you know that it's a lot of money.
Yes.
It was never going to attract a publisher. And if I
Yes.
had a publisher, a proper publisher, I wouldn't have been able to do this project. So I reached out to Eddie Ephraim's at Envisage Books, who is a sort of publisher, but it's a different arrangement. So this is like self-publishing, but having a team.
Right.
Because I love working collaboratively. It suits my brain. Now, I love to do my own thing, but then I like to have a second opinion and a third opinion and have a team who bring new insights to it. And I respect Eddie, knew that he would add value. I've got lots of books that he's worked on, and I knew that he does a good job. So I said, I'm going to do this crazy project, Eddie. It's going to make no money at all. In fact, it'll probably break the bank. Can I just pay you for your time, and will you be in the team?
Right.
And he said yes. And so we've worked on this book together. Yeah, and there's only there's a gallery edition, which is there's only 100, and there's a collector's gallery edition, which is even more luxurious, and there's only 75. And then that's it. It's done. And therefore they are very expensive, and they're being sold through galleries. And that's it. That's my crazy idea. But for people who think it's just sirens again, it's not, because fewer than half the images in the new one were in the first one. So more than half the images are new to, since sirens. They're new sirens, and there are 5 in there that have never been published anywhere before.
Fantastic.
And it's just huge. I mean, it's bigger than A3.
Can you hold it up for me?
It's 200 ESM paper. I've got, this is a dummy, and you probably can't tell online, but it's actually quite heavy. So this is a big book. It's a great big thing. But there we go.
It's either that or you're tiny. That's
Yeah.
A4, isn't it?
No. Sadly, that slender.
It just looks
anyway,
marvelous.
So it's out now. We've just got. Yeah, I'm really pleased. I think the thing at the end, which I know you'll understand, Alister, because we think alike in this, is all right. It's cost me a shed load of money. I'll be lucky if I even get back all of that money, because I'm selling through galleries and they have their cut and so on.
Sure.
But at the end of it all, I now have, for the first time, despite having now made 4 books, I have a book for the first time of which I am in every respect proud.
Yeah.
And that is worth a whole shed load of money on its own.
Yeah. And, it's one of these things that where to start with all of this. I think there's some kind of fantasy about what being a professional photographer really means. And, the word artist gets bandied around a lot, and it's one of these words that's been overused, and it's like the words professional landscape photographer. That is overused as a term now. Someone making 20 quid a month in ad revenue from YouTube is technically a professional landscape photographer. But I consider you as an artist. Your work transcends the subject, and I think that in its own right is a testament to your expressive nature and the amount of metaphor that you throw into your work. I kind of consider art as being an autobiographical or certainly some degree of social commentary. There's something going on that's just, it's not just waves, or water rushing around a shell. There's more to it than that. And I think it's harder for people to understand, really, that sometimes you just have to do something because it has to be done, and it's almost like it transcends logic, as well. Why would you spend your own money to get a product out there that is basically, at best, you're going to break even, and at worst, it's going to cost you a significant amount of cash? what is it in that that makes you want to do that? You know, why is it that you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and there are there's short answers that are kind of a bit trite, possibly, but words like legacy come to mind. Um, but in the end, it comes back to doing stuff for ourselves. Now, why are we photographers? You and I have both had other careers that enable you to make a lot more money, and they're not easy to careers to have. We worked very hard to have those careers,
Right.
and they're very hard, hard work, and they come with a lot of status. Um, so why are we photographers? For the love of it, surely, surely.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Which
And
ironically, of course, is amateur. This is it. The irony is that for the love of it is the word amateur. That's that's where it comes from. I've always said I don't
yeah,
want to be a professional. I want to be an amateur. So sorry for
yeah,
interrupting.
and well, I love that. I mean, I love words, so that's really nice. And of course, yeah, I mean, I'm an amateur who earns their living. That's it. And in
Right.
fact, I prefer the word enthusiast. I don't think I've lost the inner enthusiast. If I lost the enthusiast, which is what I was for years before I became a full time professional, earning all my income from photography, I hope I never lose that enthusiast. It's still there underneath the whole business, companies making a living thing. And this book is for the enthusiast in me. And that project, Sirens, I mean, I've done a lot of work since then, of which I'm equally proud, but I did absolutely pour my soul into that work.
Yeah.
It's probably the most expressive I have been if you look at an entire project. And I can't think of anything better to sort of treat myself to an incredible book of. I won't do another Sirens book. This is it now.
Right.
So if anyone wants Sirens, this is it, done. There won't be any more when this is gone, because you have to move on. And it
Yes.
somehow feels even better. The project feels even more significant for me that I have drawn that line under it.
Yeah, I was very much the same with Out of Darkness. Is that
Mm.
it felt, and I think the other thing for me was I needed a reason to do a book that was more than just a collection of pretty photographs. However meaningful they may be, it seemed to me that there was a deeper reason for that. And I think Sirens is another good example of that. Is it's the body of work is greater than just a collection of photographs. I think it just seemed to me that there was a huge amount of you in that. And obviously, in terms of, you talk about legacy, I think it was a body of work that really catapulted you into a far more prominent position within the sort of photographic zeitgeist. And that was amazing too. Do you feel, there was always a fear from my own point of view that Out of Darkness was somehow going to be the greatest and most significant thing that I would ever do, photographically, creatively, expressively, and that kind of, I think I'm not going to lie and say that I don't worry about that, or I don't feel that there's a certain validity to that. We don't know what our future productivity may be, or its significance. Does that enter your mind at all, or do you feel that do you feel any pressure to chase that profundity?
No, but I know there's the danger of that. I'm probably not allowing myself to go there. Not least because I actually have counted in my, I know I have peers, friends, photographers who I know have struggled with this. So their
Right,
experience has been a warning to me, I suppose,
right,
coming on a bit after them. One in particular, I remember having a very long conversation with I won't say who, but a professional photographer, landscape, with his wife. We sat next to each other at dinner once, and she told me about how he'd had this big competition win with this amazing image, and it had projected him out, and he had loads of things that happened after that. But that doesn't last forever, of course. It peters out. You're no longer the new thing.
Yeah.
And he was in the trough. He was in the Slough of Despond. He was stuck in the trough after that, and she was really worried about him. And I've never forgotten that conversation, which was many, many years ago now. And it's been maybe just a warning to me not to allow that to happen. So I've just given a talk at Creative Light up in
Yes.
Inch.
Yeah.
And the theme of the talk was, well, Sean Tucker, probably. And Sean had given a talk the day before where he talks about, amongst many, many wise things, he talks about what is your why. And so I took that and ran with it. And my why is actually the experience of making photos, of being out in the company of the sea, almost always. This thing that just fills my soul with joy and everything else. And making photographs because it connects me, it focuses me and connects me with what I'm seeing. And I try to make that my goal, to have as many experiences like that as I can. And I don't always get it right. This year I haven't been out with my camera nearly enough. I've allowed the business side and also the book, to be fair, to take up my time. And I feel the lack of it almost physically. I know I need my next fix. I need to get out there and feed my addiction. And that is what drives me. And so in the end, if you can be as much experience driven as possible, then all these other things like, oh God, where's the next hit portfolio coming from, kind of fade away. Maybe they don't go completely, but they become a very quiet thing, because it's not about that. It's not about the results. And maybe it comes to being old. That I make a point of being grateful for what I've had and for what happened. I mean, that was with Sirens. That was crazy. It's an amazing roller coaster ride that I never in my wildest dreams thought would happen to me. And it was brilliant. And I've been living on a high from that ever since. And if I don't have another experience like that, it doesn't really matter, because I had that and lots of people don't. So I think sometimes we need to try and force ourselves not to let the worries get in, to actually, they are there, but to just acknowledge them and then say, but, I'm not going to listen to you're a bad voice.
Yeah.
And I try and do that as much as I can.
I think there's a huge, you and I have spoken quite a few times now over the years, and obviously there was that one recording that we did, but it feels as if there's an awful lot we have in common. And my line of work these days is very much driven to photography will mirror us, or when it's at its best, it will mirror us in an authentic way. We can all go out and produce images that are not authentic. We can all go out and produce product that may please an audience, or may attract an audience, or may manipulate an audience. But when you're running a business and the success of that business relies upon, yes, a product, but secondly, the layers of depth underneath that product. And one of the things that always strikes me with you is that incredibly strong sense of authenticity, where the more I get to know you, the more I appreciate that your images are just an absolute direct translation in pixel form or ink dot form of you. And this is why I talk about sort of autobiographical photography in a way. And do you think that I tend to find that the more aligned I am with my own authenticity, that the easier it is to maintain and retain and nurture the enthusiast or the amateur, whichever word we prefer. But equally to just not worry about any of the byproducts of being snagged up in a business. does that make sense to you in that regard of just being 100% authentic, and you're just out there having a blast, and the product is somehow, it's almost impossible for it not to be right in a way.
Yeah, I think I don't know any other way to work actually. But you make sacrifices to be like that. For example, a large camera brand has asked me to be an ambassador, and I've turned them down because they will require me to produce a certain number of images to support their brand. Quite right, they're not going to give you free stuff for nothing,
Yeah.
and they want you to do a certain number of social media posts that promote them and so on. And I didn't even have to think for very long. I just read the list and thought, no way, because that would crush
You
my
make me feel
enjoyment
guilty now
of.
for having sponsors.
I mean, it's the downside is though that you have to buy your own cameras, so and they
Yeah.
cost money. So it it's always hard when you make your passion your job. How do you keep both? And we were talking
Yeah.
about that just now as well. I think it is quite hard. And like I said, I don't think I've quite got it right this year. I'll be honest and admit that.
Right.
I've definitely let the balance get off. The balance isn't quite balanced at the moment. But I know that, and I know I'll fight that and get it back because I must. I have to. Otherwise, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
As I said, it's crazy, crazy, stupid job to do if you're not doing it because you absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I mean, I've spoken on the YouTube channel quite a bit over the summer about being in a creative trough, and having lost that passion for my own photography. And it lasted quite a long time, and that's not to say that I haven't been out with cameras and I haven't enjoyed being out with cameras and I haven't enjoyed the images that I made, but there's a difference between that just giddy excitement of, really that freedom to be authentic versus the kind of, by the time you've been doing it long enough, you can go out anywhere and you're going to do an okay job. You can get thrown out to any coast anywhere in the world on any day of the year in any weather, and you'll come away with something just because, you're a gifted artist. Um, but it's different from being giddy and excited about it.
Mm. Well, long live the giddy excitement.
Quite right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And honestly, that's everything for me. I think I may have told you before, I forget, Alister, but there was one particular moment during the very first storm that I photoed any sirens, which was a long time ago now. There was one moment that I got the picture from that moment here on my desk, because every time I look at that picture, I remember that moment. And in that moment, having been on the beach for 6 hours looking down my long lens at the waves, no longer suddenly when I made that particular picture, I remember feeling, and it was an incredibly strong feeling, it was visceral, it really was, feeling that I was no longer an observer, I was actually part of the storm. And that sounds so airy fairy, oh how very woo, but actually I can't find any other words to describe it. It was just an incredible moment, and I can't believe that all these years later, I mean, now 7.5 years later, I can still look at that picture and feel that. It's the most connected in my whole life. We're about the same age, you and I, actually. I think we're
I
exactly the
think
same
so.
age. It was it was the only it was the only moment in my whole life where I have felt that connected to nature, to the planet, to the ocean, to the world in which we live, not as an outsider, but actually truly belonging to it. And that's an incredibly powerful emotional experience to have.
Right.
It's brilliant.
For Yeah, for me, that's very much the utopian goal I think that's why I got into photography in the first place, was to feel that connection. Yeah, as you know, I started as a bird photographer, and when you're looking through the viewfinder of a lens and connecting with another little soul that sat there,
Mm.
it does break down a lot of barriers. And I think this is why I think the metaphor of creativity and the catalyst of photography and creating with whatever medium we choose, whether it's guitars or cameras or clay or dance or words, however we choose to express ourselves, is about the dissolving of a boundary between us and it, between thought and action, or the aesthetic and the emotion. I think the more we break down those boundaries, the more we can communicate without prejudice. It just seems to me that these days that society becomes more and more polarized, and art, to me, in its purest form, is about reminding us that we're all kind of the same. And I think this is what's so beautiful about your work is, I'm always banging on about luminosity and contrast and atmosphere and all of these words that trigger me in the landscape. And the energy of your work is always something that I've been really, really drawn to. And I think that energy transfer is really what you're explaining in terms of that moment of connectedness, where you are energized by it, and somehow by recording it, you are somehow adding something to that experience above and beyond observation.
Yeah.
Sorry, there wasn't a
Um,
question in there.
there wasn't a question. I'm just diving in anyway. I think that's the crux of what we're doing, isn't it? Absolutely. I don't think I can put it any better than that. Well done. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, it is. It's quite hard to find words to explain it, and that's probably why we photograph it, because it's really hard to explain it in words. Maybe a poet can get there, um, but it's there's something transcendent about moments like that, and that's why they're really hard, I think, to explain to
Right.
anybody. So you just share the photograph and hope that the viewer gets it. That's all you can do, really.
I think this
But
is what strikes me
talking
so.
about, sorry,
No,
go
carry on.
on. No, because mine was off. I was going off on a
Okay.
tangent. So you go.
Well, I was just going to say, but I think that's possibly why your new Sirens book is going to be so much more satisfying for you, is because the heavy paper and the size of the book and the images just have that much more detail and accessibility to them. I think this is another reason why we do books these days, is that images have somehow been devalued by social media and people viewing them on their, I mean, even a Pro Max phone, it's still quite a small screen, and you
Mm.
can't appreciate beautiful images full of detail. I mean, I'm shooting with a GFX 100S these days, and you can't appreciate a beautiful 102 megapixel image on the back of a phone. It's. I think that's another reason why, books for me. I mean, we've got hundreds of books on the shelf now, and I'm going to have to talk to Anne about this. And I'm strongly tempted to collect one of yours while they're still available, because we should be buying books. I mean, I can see mine on your shelf behind you. It's
It
such an
is.
honor. Yeah, it's such an honor to have my book on your shelf. And we don't give them to each other. We buy each other's books, and it's we've got
Yeah.
another one of
Yeah.
Rachel's
Yeah.
here. So it's yeah, we're friends, but this to me is, there's no better way of seeing your work from my point of view.
Oh, I completely agree. I actually, it I'm very lucky that, I mean, there's many disadvantages to living in the Greater London area, but one of the advantages is that I get to go to a lot more exhibitions than I would if I lived somewhere more
Like we do.
picturesque and far flung.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I go up to London to exhibitions as often as I can, and obviously
Yeah.
not just photography, but all art. And nothing beats it.
No.
And of course, a lot of people, they're never going to get to see my work in exhibition, because although I do exhibit a lot, they live all over the world, and the
Yeah.
exhibition's in one place. And a book, especially a large format book like this on really high quality paper, that is the closest that I can give people the experience of seeing my pictures in exhibition as prints. And that's why I wanted it to be large,
Yeah.
because and also did we get ours printed in the same place? I think we did. EBS?
No, I got mine printed in
Did you go
Italy.
to EBS?
No, I
Oh,
got mine in
okay. Mine was in
Trento in
Verona.
Italy. Oh, right.
Oh, mine was Verona. Okay, so we were both in Italy. Anyway,
Yes.
EBS did. I'm really pleased. I went on press, which I've never been allowed or able to do before. I think people think I'll be too fussy. And I went on press with Eddie, and it was really lovely, because they really are professional. They
Right.
really care about the work they're doing. Just as we care that we produce quality work, they care about it too. They don't just want to knock it out and hope that you don't complain.
Yeah.
They pour over it, and every single picture in this book is printed to the highest standard you could possibly print in a book.
Yeah.
They are almost as good as if I put together 41 prints that I'd done myself separately
Yeah.
in my studio. And that's quite something, isn't it? To
Yeah.
get, you'll know that is really hard to get in a book.
Yes.
So yeah, it's bringing photography to people as I think it should be seen, which is printed well on good paper, and
Yeah.
not on a tiny one of these.
Yeah. But it's one of the things I'm finding also is that that we've seen the rates of inflation going up all over the place, and the cost of living, and people are struggling, and to dip your hand in your pocket and drop £500 on a book is most definitely on the luxurious end of the spectrum. Yeah, my collector's edition's more than that. But it's yeah, we do it because we have to do it. It's an exciting thing to do. What's next for Rachael Talibart after we're nearly end of
Well,
2023 and
yeah. Unbelievably, I actually do have 2 other books waiting in the pipeline. I haven't decided actually how I'll do them yet. They won't be like this one, because you make a really good point. I don't think you were trying to make this point just then, but I think you make a really good point about how often is it okay to produce something that really only rich people are going to be able to afford. My previous books have been more in the sort of price point that people are used to when they
yeah,
buy a photo book. So it's just this one that I'm doing super expensive, because it's the only way I could possibly do it.
yes,
But it doesn't mean I'm not going to go back to producing books that are aimed at the more normal price bracket. And the next 2 books will be, but they won't be sirens. That's
yeah,
done. So I've got a book of abstract and detail work, which
nice,
is next. And then I want to do a black and white that
nice,
is entirely black and white. And I
nice.
will probably go to EBS for both of those, because
Okay.
I'm so happy with the quality of printing.
So are you going to go down the
So
self-published route
that's what's
again?
ahead. Yes, but this time it will be a much larger print run, so much smaller price point.
Yeah.
And I'll pay someone to distribute them, because I'm not doing that.
Very
I don't know how
wise.
you've done that.
Well,
I did it with Verse Siren.
my wonderful wife,
Yeah.
basically, um, the number of emails we got complimenting me on the packing was was exceptional. So
It was most excellent packing.
how much of your year is workshop driven these days. You were doing 3 back-to-back weeks on Iceland when I met you in September. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah. I probably do slightly too many workshops, I suspect. Well, with Iceland, I only do 3 weeks in Iceland in a
A
year.
year.
I just do them back to back so that I only have one carbon footprinty flight.
Yes.
And also, I had clients doing more than 1 week back to back.
Yeah.
So, some clients did 2 weeks back to back. I have
Yeah.
very rarely had someone do 3.
Yeah.
So for me, that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
And I actually really enjoyed it. It sounds like it's really hard work, doesn't it? And in fact, I'd been out there for a week before that,
All
recceing for a
right.
new workshop. So it's 4 weeks really. And it does sound like really hard work, but I am blessed with really lovely clients. I do
Yeah.
feel very blessed with these clients. It's not hard spending time in their company.
No.
And they all love photography. They're all enthusiasts. Get back to my lovely word that I love so much, just like us. And that's inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, we're running businesses, and there's a fiscal reward for work, as there should be. But I agree with you that I think when you can transfer, or when because people go with you because they're inspired by your work. That they can go to Iceland with anybody. They can go to Iceland on their own, but to go with you, or I guess, for people that come with me, that they're coming with us for specific reasons. But I do feel, and I shouldn't really be announcing this too publicly, I suppose, that I feel as if I get as much out of it from an inspiration and sort of living vicariously through their excitement, especially if you're going back somewhere that you've been to numerous times, seeing it through their eyes for the first time almost. And that's one of the things with seascape photography, is every day is different. Every moment is fresh and exciting, and the beaches are getting washed clean twice a day. And to go back time and time again, go back 2 days in a row, and it's a different beach. I think that's one of the really
Yeah.
exciting things about it. But one of the things I'd love to go on a workshop with you. I'm just not paying you.
That would be fun. We would have a lot of fun. Yeah, I really love sharing. Yeah, I really love sharing with people. I think you just touched on that really. I love sharing with people places that inspire me and moments that inspire me, because it's not very location driven.
Right.
The only thing that ever wrong foots me on a workshop, it very rarely happens, is if I take a group to somewhere that I consider completely gorgeous and someone just doesn't like it. And I have had that happen this year on one workshop. I took a group somewhere that we had actually detoured. The whole day was about going to this place because I think it's one of the most amazing things. And when we got there, one of the group just said, "Oh, I've never been into this sort of thing. I can't imagine spending 2 hours here." And
Oh,
that I find really hard to spring back from that, actually,
right.
because you, as a leader, you get your energy from the feedback from people's faces and their body language and all
Right.
of that. And so there's nothing more de-energizing than that. But equally, it was really honest of her to
Yeah.
share that with me. Feel good that I had created a space where someone felt able to share that with me, because in a way it's a request for help too, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I was able then to show her how, if she used a longer focal length, she might more be able to abstract the scene and find more interest and so on. But I must admit, those moments, very rare, once a year if or less. You might get
Mm.
a moment like that. I'm doing a lot of workshops. I find that quite hard. So I really want people to be excited by what they're seeing.
I've always said the hardest thing about running workshops is managing other people's expectations. I think that, weather environments, tides, storms, even travel upsets or irregularities you can handle, but other people's expectations, if they're unrealistic but I think that's one of the advantages of going with someone like you is that, your body of work is recognizably intimate. I think, that there's a very strong sense of intimacy with your images. And I think if people were thinking they were going to go for big vista sunset type work, then they would clearly realize from your body of work that that was probably unlikely.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of the reasons I've stopped doing gift vouchers on my workshops website, because I had someone this year who'd been bought the workshop, bought a gift voucher by a family member, and they showed up with no idea of who I was or what I do. And that's really hard then, because their expectations, they were expecting a standard workshop where you sort of, well, is there such a thing now? I don't know. But maybe what people think is standard, where you're sort of driven to a big vista, a honeypot location, and told these are the three holes, and stand in, queue up and everyone make
Yeah,
that picture. And that's not how I do it at all.
no.
And so I've taken gift vouchers away now because I don't want that situation again.
If you got any left, send them my way then, and I'll use them to come in a workshop. Yeah, you mentioned that you'd been up in the Cairngorms just this last week with Margaret Soraya and
Mhm.
involved in
Yeah, that
her.
was,
She's a wonderful woman. She's just
it was
amazing.
really nice because, well, even though she and I have communicated online and have been in Harris on the same beach at the same moment, we worked it out. We'd never actually met.
Yeah,
So, because I was down one end of the beach and she was
yeah.
with clients, I was on my own, she was with clients down the other end. So we'd never actually met. So it was really nice, just like it was nice when we met. It was really nice to meet her in person.
She's so
I
lovely.
unfortunately, yeah, she is. I couldn't be there for long enough because I've never liked the kind of, I'm a rock star, I'll swoop in, deliver my talk and swoop out. I usually would go and watch everyone else's talks and
Mm.
support them and be part of it. But unfortunately, I had 2-day workshops on Thursday and Friday, and I had a day workshop on Monday. So all I could do was go up Saturday morning, and then I had a flight back Sunday evening, and BA cancelled that and put me on one on Sunday morning.
Oh,
So I literally was there for less than 24 hours, which was miserable because it looked like it was an epically good time.
it looked beautiful, didn't it? The weather was insane, but no waves.
Yeah, it was
How did you cope?
no waves at all. No, not coast at all. Well, that's okay. There was water. There's a lovely.
Yeah, it's a really pretty place. It's really sweet. But yeah, Margaret,
Mm.
she's just an amazing character, and talking about having a relationship with her element, obviously with her wild swimming and getting into that bay many mornings of the year, and she's I think she's a great ambassador for where I think a few of us are heading these days. Education to me isn't about, like you say, the three holes and saying, yeah, F11 at 3 seconds and ISO 100 and this focal length and so forth. I don't believe that's education. I don't believe it ever was education. And it seems to me that you, Margaret, myself, and there's so many others who I could mention. Bill Neal, um, the that understanding that we need to have a relationship with the landscape. It's our relationship with the landscape is our unique selling point. To use a business term, our USP is our unique individual perspectives and relationships with the elements around us. And I think this is what's attracting me so much to your work and Margaret's work and so many other people who I feel unworthy to be part of that group. Um, you know, I'm just such a huge fan of your work. It's as simple as that. I find that very inspiring. But I've got no desire to sort of copy or emulate or turn myself into a little mini Rachel clone. I don't have the hair for it, but um, you know that who who inspires you in that regard? Who's living the life of a photographer that kind of strikes you as, yes, I'm getting something out of that. That's a nasty question.
Oh, that's a really hard question. Um, I'm not sure. No, I'm never lost for words, am I? So I better come up with something. There are lots of photographers that I follow, that I admire. I go to exhibitions, I buy their books, and it's quite hard to narrow that down. I do love just kind of finding someone new. That's
Mm.
really exciting, isn't it? Um, Now, there's an American called Megan, I don't know how you pronounce it, Riepenhoff. Have you come across her?
No.
So when I was at EBS in Verona on press, the client rooms are lined with all the books because they're allowed to keep a copy of every book they've ever
Right.
printed, quite rightly. So there are all these completely amazing books
Oh,
everywhere,
wow.
which was wonderful. And I found a book by this photographer, and it's very abstract, her work, with a coastal theme. Um, and I was quite blown away by it. So go and look her up.
Okay.
There are other photographers I know doing similar work. There's one in the UK. And I had mistakenly thought that I won't say who, this photographer in the UK was the originator of this technique. But now I know that was completely not the case. Megan Riepenhoff has been doing this for ages, and her
All
work's in the
right.
Smithsonian, and she's right up here.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really excited to discover this photographer and her work. Um, Another one who I really admire and have had the honour of working with is, I've mentioned before, possibly Ragnar Axelsson,
Hmm.
Icelandic photographer. His website is rax.is because that's his nickname, Raxi. And he's probably the most famous sort of A-list contemporary Icelandic photographer.
Okay.
And he does these amazing human interest, but they're still art as well. They're not documentary. Human interest stories, photographic stories. He embeds himself with the people that he's working with. So, he has spent lots of time in Greenland actually with the hunters, going off with them. He's had frostbite, he's had all sorts, he's really put himself out there for this, and has talk about authenticity. He's not an observer who just comes in a helicopter with his, brand new North gear and gets a few photographs and flies off again to his 5-star hotel. He walks the walk. He really
Right.
does. And there's an authenticity behind that I think you can guess that he's like that just from looking at the photographs.
Right.
So that really inspires me.
Good. Well,
What about you?
having,
What about you?
oh my goodness.
You can tell me. Come up with some.
No, it's quite interesting, really, because I think my probably the majority of my aesthetic inspiration and life motivation comes from musicians more than photographers. Um, it's I've spent over 20 years now looking at photography, um, and one of the questions I asked myself when I decided to make this a living for myself and my wife was, what can I add to that? Can I add to our volume of knowledge, or the value of our art form? And one of the things that I recognized was that there wasn't many people out there using photography as a self-development and introspective tool, almost like a winkle pick, a winkle needle, to get in there and root out the kind of hidden perspectives and emotions and feelings. Whereas music, I think, is a much more accessible form. We hear a song and it speaks to us very, very directly and profoundly without any thought, and I think one of my biggest concerns with photography was that it required a very long and hard apprenticeship to even understand the true language of it. To be a critic rather of high level photography, you need to be qualified to discuss those things. Whereas everyone knows what music they like. You don't need to know what key it's in to like it. Whereas I think photography is a little bit less accessible on an emotional level. Not everyone is speaking that same language. So for me, I like to listen to musicians talking about their passion and their music and its meaning and how it's part of who they are. And I think a lot of the questions that I have asked you this afternoon are very much along the same lines, is that I believe that your art is a product of you, and its uniqueness is that there's any number of photographers who I admire, but like they're too numerous to mention. But most of them no one's ever heard of. There's a woman on the Expressive Photography Forum, an Austrian woman called Astrid, whose work blows me away on a daily basis. She's just a phenomenally gifted and creative person. So many people I run the Expressive Photography Forum, and most of the people in the forum, Maddie from Holland, Mike Jones, Pascal from France, those guys are producing images that blow me away on a daily basis, and no one's ever heard of any of them, really. So, but all my friends are professional photographers. So all of them, the fact that they're my friends means that I'm inspired by them. So you, Theo Bosboom, Guy Tal, Alex Noriega, Bill Neal, Joe Cornish, David Ward, all of those people make fabulous and inspiring images. Anyone whose book I've ever bought, I'm buying it not because it's like, oh, well, I'm going to buy their book so they'll buy my book. It's not Instagram. It's because I want this on my shelf. I want to be able to pick it up and sit at the table in my office or in the living room and look at it. But yeah, I mean, I feel very, very, very fortunate to have made the choice to make this my career, and just getting to hang out with you and talk and realize that we share, despite having so many differences in our lives, we share a passion, and that's inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I keep doing the workshops, because you're hanging out with people who feel that way.
Yeah.
Most of the clients,
Yeah.
vast majority, almost all of them are there because they are absolutely passionate and about it, and they're with me, as no doubt yours are with you, because they don't want to do just the let me see a golden hour sunset with a nice big foreground and
Yeah.
a mountain in the background. They know that's not what I do. They know they're looking. Almost every client I ever work with is looking for that something deeper that allows them to express something personal. And their work won't look like mine most of the time. Sometimes it does, but most of the time it doesn't. And that's because they're succeeding. They're producing work that expresses them, not me.
Yeah.
And it's
The
really,
funniest
really rewarding to work with people like that.
the funniest one I ever had was that I took some clients to one of the honeypot locations on the north coast of Spain. It's on the cover of my night photography book, these jagged pinnacles and stuff. And I took everyone down there, and everyone wants to go because it's such a beautiful place. And so I got everyone set up, and we were talking and sort of pointing out all the different aspects of this beach. And I got this one guy from Wisconsin was stood there and kind of looking out to sea. Fabulous conditions. And I wandered off down the beach to talk to somebody else, and I came back up, and he was photographing a lock on a rusty lock on a wooden door.
Wow.
Halfway halfway back up the hill. That was what spoke to him at that location, was an old rusted lock on an old wooden door. And I
Yeah.
just thought, yes, you know yourself, and you know what you like, and you know why you're here, and that's it really in a nutshell. I'm not sure
Absolutely.
entirely that he actually photographed the sea stacks at all. It was just like, oh yeah, they're very nice.
Oh,
Now I'm
good
going to
for
go and
him.
photograph a rusty lock. So that was kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Sounds good. I like that.
Now, as always, I'm sure we could talk forever. We've managed to pass an hour with no difficulty whatsoever.
Wow.
I think for anyone who's still listening to this or watching this on YouTube, congratulations. We will now consider you a super fan. Um, Congratulations for getting this far, and congratulations for my wife for editing it this far. Um, but yeah, Rachel, it's always a pleasure. It was, like I said, it was just such a joy to meet you, and I hope we have an opportunity to do so for longer in the future. It would be lovely to hang out and maybe go shooting together sometime. That would be a really great privilege. But thank you very much for taking time out
We
of your
should make that
day.
happen.
Yeah, we should. We should.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to broadcast what I told you earlier yet, but I'll see you there.
Okay. All right.
So thank you very
Excellent.
much for your time. Wonderful talking to you.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome.